I'm all excited about this presentation, and I'm going to tell you why. There's a lot of neat things that we've been looking into about the shocking truths that people just don't seem to realize as they're going through organizing their scanned pictures specifically. So we're going to plow through these. We're going to kind of have some fun today. There's things that people just kind of overlook, and we're going to take our presentation today and divide it up into a couple of things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to present the issue, and then we're going to talk about it just a little bit and share some thoughts on it, and then we'll talk more specifically about putting it to practice, whether you are doing your scanning of photos yourself, you're doing it for your friends and family, or you're doing it as a client basis and a business type of thing. So hopefully we'll all have a lot of fun, and we'll learn a couple of things as we go along. And so let's just go ahead, if we can, and get started. The first question that we probably need to always ask ourselves is, why this topic? Why in the world would we talk about the shocking truths about photos? And there's a couple of reasons why, because we are on this exponential growth of the use of photos, especially in the world that we live in today. I want to take you back for a moment and share with you just something that happened just not even 20 years ago, when Kodak announced in 2000 that for the very first time, they had a record 80 billion photos made in the year 2000. We crossed over into the year 2000, and this astronomical number of pictures that had never been taken, that many in one single year, happened. Now, let's fast forward a couple of years. Infotrend predicted back in 2015 that there would be about 1.3 trillion pictures taken in 2017. Well, as the numbers started to roll in, and we started getting applications like Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest and on and on and on, we got this new number coming around, because all of a sudden, daily, people were putting up to 85 million photos into Instagram, and they're putting 350 million photos into Facebook every single day last year. So Deloitte came out with a new number. Deloitte came out with the number 2.5 trillion pictures will be stored online, or were stored online, in 2016. We went from 80 million to 2.6 trillion in just a decade and a half. We've been inundated with photos, and now all of a sudden we love our photos, but we're drowning in them. So we now have another issue, and the issue is, with all of the photo sharing and all of the digital photo applications and methodologies that we can take with regards to our photos, and now with more than almost 90% of photos being taken with those smartphones we have in our pockets, people are looking back. They're looking back to those treasured memories that they had. They'd like to unlock those memories that are found in shoeboxes, found in albums, found in scrapbooks. Because before, we faced, early on in the 2000s, we faced this digital divide. We faced all the stuff kind of going forward was digital, but what about all the stuff behind? It was too complicated. It was too hard. It was too difficult to digitize that, and so we got this digital divide. But now, very quickly, folks are looking at the digital divide and saying, maybe it's not as hard as we think to make the jump. And so our photo libraries are expanding at these exponential rates. this is a really fun graphic, and it shows you something that if you're struggling or you know somebody that's struggling with their photo organization, then they need to take a look at this. And you'll see on the bottom, it's got the photos taken per day, or the photos that we put into our lives every single day. And then on the upward axis, we see that it says the time that we spend going through them. And as that number increases of the number of photos that we deal with every single day, you'll see something that they've decided to take a look at with regards to just our total well-being. Those first ones, no problems. But as we get a few more, then all of a sudden your photo library, fits on most devices as long as they're not too old. I think you probably can identify with that. And then all of a sudden, now you need some cloud storage, and you need some external hard drives and frequent upgrades. And then Moore's Law kicks in, and your library of photos is growing much faster than you can even handle and sort them out. And so now you have a choice. Either you're going to have really a lousy photo organization program, or you're not going to sleep at night. You're just going to sit there and sort photos. So it's kind of an interesting way of looking at struggling over photo organizing. And the truth of the matter is, that's what a lot of people wind up facing. They look at this world of photos, and then they've got all their printed photos, those treasures that have all those memories, and they want to unlock them and bring them across the digital divide. And they sit there and go, oh my, what next? So we're going to take a look at, as people go through this process, what types of things they have a tendency to overlook. Now, I thought I'd try like the David Letterman approach, where you count it down like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, all the way down to 1. However, as I did that, I realized that the very first one of our misses was the foundation of all the others. So we're going to work through them in categories of 1, 2, 3, 4, and down to 10, although I must say that you can choose the priority of them. This happens to be the ones that come up to us the most in the order that they come up with. So let's start looking at some of these truths. The first truth that we need to look at is what I call the no plan smackdown. And you've all heard failing to plan is planning to fail. And I get it, but this is never more true than in photo organizing. And when you look at a plan, you have to start asking yourself, what is a plan? How does a plan work? And a plan, any kind of action plan, first of all, should be specific, and it should be measurable. It should be achievable, it should be relevant, and it should be framed within some sort of time. Now, when you think of a plan, and you're thinking of your photo library, you start looking at this and you go, where are we now? And all of a sudden, they go, oh my, I'm in a mess. Where do we want to be? Well, they've got some vision of grandeur in their heads, some pie in the sky, some mythical photo library that they can just walk up magically, talk to their computer or Siri or Alexa or whoever and say, show me the picture of. Then they get kind of stuck. How do I get from here, where I am, to there? And how will we know when we got there? There's so many possibilities. And how will we know if we've been successful? So when you think about photo organization, just like so many things in life, we need to think about a plan that's specific and measurable, achievable, that's relevant, and has a time frame that we're going to work on it. And I've got a great tool that I am going to include in the handouts. Now, just a piece of note here about the handouts. We've been having a little bit of trouble with people finding them, so they will be included in the link that you get with the recording of this presentation, so to make it a little bit easier. But I've got a great handout, and this handout is what should an action plan include? And it also shows you some very basic things. Now, whether you're doing this yourself, or you're doing it for others, or you're doing it as a family, you need to sit down and go through this 4 processes where you evaluate and you take a look, you construct, you implement, and you keep going around in this circle. But a lot of people look at that action plan and say, okay, I got it, Rick, we've been there, seen that before. But there's more to it than that, because each one of these steps has little mini steps, and it's the details that you pay into these mini steps that will mean big success, or possibly just letting that plan fall along the wayside and be another tragedy in the path of trying to get folks' photo libraries converted into digital images, and then getting all those digital images converted into some sort of usable, meanable system. So we want to make sure that we're checking the progress and checking our success, and that you've got little mini checks, is what we like to call them here in our office, as you go through the process. And finally, there's kind of a, I guess, a action plan staging that you might want to think about looking at, and that's preparing and making sure that you've got all your preparations and you've got your tasks and your routes and your destinations, and that you've got ways to check along the way. It's kind of like taking a trip. We went to Cleveland not long ago for the APO conference, for the Association of Personal Photo Organizers, and as we went along, if we didn't know where we were and take kind of checks along the way, we'd not know if we were there or here or someplace else. We need to have some sort of roadmap, and that's what your plan does. It lays it out, and it can be fairly simple, or it can be as detailed as you want with, you know, something like a Garmin with every turn and every gas station and every place you can stop and get a Coca-Cola. But you need to have some sort of plan. So how do we do it in our office? Well, we do a couple of things for our clients, and we do them for ourselves when we take on jobs. Now, for those of you that don't know much about Easy Photo Scan, we have a tendency to take on larger jobs than maybe the normal person, that individual that has a kind of a few pictures in a box, and I mean a few to the 10,000, 20,000 count. Our jobs have a tendency to take on kind of numbers like hundreds of thousands. The newest job that we're involved with is tens of millions of pictures. And you got to kind of sit down and just draw it out simply. You know, your process of digitizing photos is just one part of the entire thing. In fact, digitizing photos is easy. What you got to think about is, how is this going to flow through? So we have some graphs and some charts. We, in fact, use a program, and there's many of them. I'm not going to tell you this is the only one. It just happens to be the one that we use, called MyNemo, and that is actually a plan for a client that you can see there, and how we're mapping out all of the different steps, and you'll see that you can arch over and put, if this happens, a kind of if-then statements. And that is really a design for doing a project. This project happened to be a 100-year-old organization, needed all their printed items digitized that they've collected over the last century, and we've been working on that to the tune of, I think, something like 70,000 images. And that's the process that we went through. But we did that first up. We sat down with the client and we worked through it, and just whether you're doing it with yourself or with your family, or if you're doing it with your client, make sure that you're mapping things out. All right. It doesn't have to be as complex as that, but you need to have at least a plan. So let's jump into number 2. Number 2 is just flat missing the boat in budgeting. Budgeting is kind of important, but when we talk about budgeting at our office, we're not just talking about money. While money is part of the budget, there's actually 3 things, and only 3, that you will ever need to budget. And the first is time. And time is the killer. You need to understand your time process. You need to make sure that you are cognizant of the time that's going to take, because there's nothing worse, I don't care how much they pay you, than missing the job opportunity or promising somebody something and not delivering. The second is budgeting your talent. Now, we have a lot of resources here, but we don't have every resource. And we have to rely on our network of folks that we have worked through and become acquainted with and associated with in order for us to budget the talent. So we know, well, this is not something that we can do, but we can connect you here and either be a conduit or we can get it done for you. However you want to do that, but you need to make sure that you have the talent lined up and ready to go. And then finally, we look at the treasure. And when we talk about treasure, how much is this thing going to cost? But you can so quickly kind of get down, especially if you're doing this for others, and say, well, how much is this going to cost? How much does that cost? How much does this cost? And while that is all very important, and certainly if you don't have the money, you don't have the treasure, you're not probably going to get very far in your project, no matter how much time you have, and if you don't have the right tools, how much talent that you have. So you want to make sure that you're budgeting all 3 of these things. And then finally, you want to ask them the 3 T's, or ask yourself, do I have the time to do this? And if I do, how long do I expect it to take? Do I have the talent to do this? And if I don't, where am I going to go find the talent or borrow the talent? And, you know, I'll even tell you another kind of fun thing. We get folks that want to do a lot of these projects themselves, and we encourage them to do it. However, you know, they're always relying on somebody. They're going to go, oh, my sister and my brother-in-law are going to come over, and we're just going to whip through all of this. We run into them a week or 2 months later. Hey, how'd that go? Well, brother-in-law, sister didn't show up, so I didn't get as much done. So even if you're expecting other talent, make sure that it's reliable and you can depend on it. And then finally, how much did this cost? Did I make sure that I had enough of resources in my pocket as we go through? So when a client comes to us, we're always asking a little bit about, well, how much time do you think you can devote to this? How much talent do you have? Do you want to learn some new skills? And then finally, we have a fundamental way to come up with how much money. And this is what we do. You don't have to do it, but this is how it applies for here. We actually do some work. We do it as a sample. We don't ask them to pay for it unless it gets way out of control, but normally it's just a sample of the product that we're going to be working with. And we actually then put ourselves on a time and motion study. In fact, this last job, we actually got an old, well, I don't say old, it was brand new, but we bought a time clock so that people could come in and out. And why did we do that? Well, the reason why is because when we were scanning negatives, we bid this job on time. And the reason we bid it on time was because a lot of these 70,000 images were negatives. So go us. But every negative was going to take somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.5 to 4 minutes to digitize. And so we could multitask. We could be working on other things. So we literally put in a time and motion study, realized how we could do it. And I'll tell you, we did a trial sample, and when we ended the job, which we have, it worked out just exactly as we expected, because what we were doing was we were taking real work, multiplying it by real time, and then coming up with real costs. So I encourage you to think about how you can do that, or and especially if the jobs get kind of big. Number 3, here's some shocking truth, and that is that people try to take on the whole elephant and eat it at one time. And so they wind up just literally overwhelmed. Now, the average African elephant weighs somewhere between 2.5 and 7 tons, and their cousins from Asia weigh somewhere between 2.5 to 5.5 tons. And the only way you can tackle a big project, or we recommend any project, is to make sure that you understand how you're going to divide it up. And so that means getting out a fork and a knife and trying to figure out where we're going to split it up. There's a great poem. I won't go through the whole poem, but if you have not read the poem Blind Men and the Elephant by John Godfrey Saxe, S-A-X-E, I recommend that after this presentation, you jump out to the internet and read that poem. This poem is about 6 men of Indostan. To learning much inclined, they all went to see an elephant, but each of them were blind. And that's a lot of what happens when you kind of tackle a project for your photo library and trying to get it organized. You think you got it. You think it's like a rope, but it's really a tail. You think it's like the trunk of a tree, but it's really just a leg. You think it's like a snake, but it's really the elephant's nose and trunk. And so you wind up in a situation maybe misjudging that project because you miss the whole picture. You didn't see everything. You just looked at one part of it. And that's a very important thing that we always ask people to do. And that is when we're working through folks' projects, or we're looking at kind of projects, is to look at the project and say, is this it? That question we teach everybody in our organization. And besides that, is there anything else? Is that all? We call those checking questions. And we mean checking questions mean they're going to tell you something, and then you're going to go, wow, that's great. Is that all? Is that it? Would there be anything else? Besides this, is there something else? And you can see real quick, all of a sudden you realize, man, you got this leg, and they're showing you the leg of the elephant, but they forgot to show you the flappy banana ear type of the project, and they forgot to tell you the tail, which is like the rope of the project. And so all of a sudden you wind up not being able to plan effectively. So you want to use your plan, and you want to go through these checking questions, and then you can begin to set some benchmarks. You can begin to set things out how you would like them to approach each of the different areas. Now, number 4, this truth happens, and people don't even know that it's happening, is they wind up painting themselves in a corner. Now, how can that be? You've got everything laid out. You've already decided that you're going to get a good plan, and you've already decided that you're going to check on the budget and make sure you've got time and talent and treasure. And you've already decided that you're getting all these understandings that make sure that I get the whole picture and I don't try to eat the whole thing at one time. But yet, boom, before you know it, you wind up in a corner, painted there, and you can't get out very easily. The reason why we have found that happens is that although we have a plan, we don't necessarily write it all down. And there's something about when you write that plan down, there's something about when you take the project and put it to some sort of either just a checklist or a spreadsheet or a document or whatever it is, all of a sudden you start going, wow, there's a lot of things going on here. There's a lot of stuff I've got to worry about. And then what happens is we get unreasonable types of expectations coming on. And we'll talk about this in just a moment and put it all together in a project that we're in the process of doing right now. So this is why we try to jump over these expectation hurdles early. And when we do that, we find we have the most success. So let's go back to this project that we've been working on that we just finished up, and it's, as I said, it was about 70,000 images, and there was a plethora of slides and negatives and printed photographs. It was a great project to work on. The client, when they came in, they said, well, we're thinking about doing this ourselves. We said, fantastic, good luck. If there's anything we can do to help you, let us know. They said, oh, no. We're thinking about doing parts of it ourselves. We have this talent, but we don't have this equipment. And this, okay, great. So we put together our plan. We did the testing as we talked about. But one thing that we always want to do is we want to ask, what is your expectations of this project? And they were pretty simple. They had started this project. As I said, it was a 100-year celebration, and the 100 years doesn't start until 2018. And we started this project back in 2016, and we're like, wow, cool, you're planning. Time is on our side. And so we walked through a process, and we said, what do you expect? And when we turned around and said, every negative that we scan will take 3.5 minutes, and there's this many tens of thousands of those times 3.5 minutes. It's this many hours of time that our machines are just going to run. Doesn't mean we have to do a whole lot sometimes to them. We just kind of babysit them, but they're running. Okay? And so we started to put a plan together. And as we worked through this plan, we kept going, when do you expect this, and when do you expect this, and when do you expect this? So we ramped up in order for us to accomplish the project, and the marketing group that we were working with, they ramped up, and then they got behind. We got into the Thanksgiving holiday, then people went on vacation, and somebody went skiing, and so we're over here ready to go, right? And they are, behind. But who are they behind? They're behind their own expectations, not ours. And we didn't feel painted in the corner. Now they kept going, oh, we're going to be there with more stuff. And the reason why we didn't feel like we were painted in the corner, because we were doing fine. We had already budgeted everything. What they had done is they had realized that they had tried to eat the whole elephant and said, oh, well, we'll just do 5 boxes. That's all they said. We're just going to send you 5 boxes every week. Well, that was fine. We knew what it would take to finish it. However, they didn't think about the variations in those boxes that we had already told them about. And so they dropped behind, especially when somebody went on vacation, et cetera. But it wasn't my expectation they were breaking their own. And so the nice thing about it was that, hey, we're here, we're ready to help you anytime. But if you let them set too high of an expectation, your client or your family members or whatever, they're only going to wind up stumbling and falling and going, well, isn't this done yet? How hard can it be to stick pictures in a scanner? Which leads me to our next unbelievable truth. And that is that you don't want to get trapped in indebtedness. Now, what do we mean by that? You have the right to say no. So many times people walk in to our offices with stuff, or they call us for some advice, and all of a sudden they say, well, I've been told I should do this, and I've been told I should do that. And somebody told me I needed to do it this way. A good one is when we deal with genealogy, I've been told I need to do it in TIFF. Wow, TIFF is a great option. And we love to scan in TIFF. We can scan in TIFF. In fact, we can scan in TIFF using our equipment as fast as we can scan into JPEG. But let me ask you a question. What do you expect to do with it? Well, these are just my family photos. I want to put them in, make them, share them so we can put them in an album, maybe make a little book about them or put them up and so that people can just pass them around and share them because my kids don't want any of the boxes, the pictures to go through. All right, I get it. But let me ask you another question. Do you know how big a TIFF image will be? And why do you have TIFF? Well, I've just always read. And so then you have an opportunity to do a little learning with them and sharing information with them. Not that we don't love to do TIFF images, we do. But if you start your plan with an unrealistic expectation that somebody else is setting for you, then you have some challenges. And sometimes it's okay to say no. And it's okay for the client to say no, because if you have a reasonable plan and a reasonable budget and a reasonable strategy, expectations don't get out of control. But if you work your program like this picture of this inverted pyramid and you don't have much of a plan, then all of a sudden the budget starts to bloom, and then all of a sudden your strategies go out the window, and then everybody's got an expectation. Oh, you should do this and you should do this, because there's so many possibilities. So it's okay to say no. And when I mean that, I don't mean it in a nasty way. You want to practice it. You want to say it, not to them first. Say it to yourself. Stand in the mirror. Hey, listen, I'd love to do that for you, or I'd love to do this for you, and do it in TIFF. However, you know, what we really looked like was there was probably only about 100 of these pictures that we felt were of such value that we would really like to do something from a real preservation standpoint. And meanwhile, all these other snapshots, we'd like to just get them digitized so everybody can enjoy them and share them. And then once you've done it, don't look back. Move on and keep going, because what happens is sometimes we live in the world of regret. We talk to organizers all over the country, and they go, if only I had done that, if only I had done that. Well, you know, I tell you that from our perspective, that's kind of a good sign, meaning that you are learning as you're going along, but don't get hung up in the if-onlys. Just look forward and let's keep going and keep improving and learning the lessons that you got along the way from this. And practice saying no. It won't hurt you, and actually, once you've done it a couple of times, it gets easier and easier. And don't forget, there's always the no but. Now, number 6 is something that we just, now we sell equipment, right? So you would think that we're like, oh man, you got to buy this widget and this gadget. But fundamentally, all these tools are made by people to sell to you people. And the neat thing about it is, if you're in this business, you kind of like gadgets. You kind of like applications. You kind of like all those cool things because they're so cool. Man, I got this new program that I'm just testing, and I'm just loving it to death. It analyzes things and uses machine learning to help set the image quality, and I'm like going, wow, this is an amazing tool. And I just had to have it. Same way with all sorts. The office will tell you, and every once in a while I wind up getting a little bit overboard with testing and trying new tools and new gadgets because we're attracted to them. They're things that all of a sudden, hey, you know, we love that kind of thing, and we love that kind of technology. Isn't that cool technology? But you know what? There are over 2,000 storage applications that I've been able to identify. And while there's only a few of the major ones, it's over 2,000. There's over 40,000 photo editing apps. So you can see that all of a sudden you can get overwhelmed. You can get literally run over with all of these different tools and applications in the photo market. And why are they there? Let's remember the first slide we showed you. We're there because there's 2.5 trillion pictures being done, and that means that there's billions of photographers. And photographers just, it's like fishing. I've got to have that new lure. I've got to have that new spinner. I've got to have some, that new rod. All of those types of things. It's just widgets and gadgets to scratch an itch. So we've put together a list here, and we try from the standpoint of working with our clients to make sure they follow the list. They have a hard time fighting me with this list, I must tell you, but we try to make sure that the client gets only what they want and what they need. And first of all, in our list is, what itch am I trying to scratch? Can you identify what problem or what opportunity you're trying to find? Then you want to find out, does that tool or app, who makes something like that? And one of the big things we run into often is they go, well, what do you recommend? And I'm like, well, there's 2,000 storage apps out there. Now I can tell you the top 10, and I can tell you ones that are easy to work with, but there's a whole lot more to making a decision than just who makes it. Because there's specifications, and do those specifications match your first question? What itch are you trying to scratch? How easy is it to use? How do you get support? Can you get support? Can you try it? And if you can't try it, sometimes you just can't try things, then will they take it back? Can I return it? What will actually it do for me or save me from doing? That's always something that I really stress that folks take a look at when they're thinking about equipment. Now, maybe some of you have had the opportunity to talk to us and say, well, I'm thinking I need this, and I'm thinking I need that. And we go, well, okay, well, what are you trying to do? Because we want to make sure that what you're doing with your equipment is actually going to be the solution that you're looking for. Because after that, then it all starts to boil down to costs, right? How much does this thing cost to get? And there's always that initial cost, and then there's the lifetime cost, right? Free storage for my photos. Oh yeah, they're compressed, and you get X amount of storage space, which is good for so many pictures, and then after that, oh, well, then there's a cost. So you want to make sure you understand the lifetime costs of this. And especially when you're talking about pictures, man, those shoe boxes, they lasted a long time. You put them in a corner, and they last a long time. We put these up, and we start sharing them in a digital format. It's kind of hard once you get 10,000 pictures in an application to start moving things around, especially if you've put sidecar metadata into it. So you always want to ask those questions and make sure that you understand, if you're doing it for others, what the client's expectations are for ongoing lifetime costs, because that's part of that budget process we spoke about earlier. And then the last question that we ask in our 10 major questions in this area is, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if I do this, and then also if I don't do this? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? And if at the end of the day it doesn't seem that bad, well, then maybe it's okay to move forward with it. Number 7 is an interesting one, and that one is not having somebody in your corner of the ring when you're taking on that match of trying to fight through and get all those photos organized into that library, get them digitized, go through that whole process. It's interesting because having somebody there to help you. In fact, this is exactly what the Association of Personal Photo Organizers is doing. They're building a support system, a ring, someone in your corner of the ring to help you. Or perhaps you don't work with an organizer, but you are out there trying to do this with your family. You need to organize and get somebody in your ring and get there to help you, because I will tell you this, it is very possible that when you start on a process that you actually wind up encountering a rather how do I say it, tough experience. And when I mean that, I don't mean it that you are actually getting beat up, but it sure can beat you up. You can feel dog-tired. You can lose your focus. You can lose your perspective. You can make the wrong choices. You can lack motivation and not have anybody to kind of help you out. And really, if you stop to think about it, and we've run into a few people like this, if you don't have somebody in your corner, you really are only shadowboxing and beating up yourself. And so what we suggest is finding a support mechanism, some resources to help you, whether you pay for them or there's somebody that you know that's done them, or they're clubs, associations, photo clubs, photography clubs, groups of people, genealogy groups, somebody that you can connect with to help you and build that support system. It makes a lot of sense that if you don't have somebody in your corner, you're going to wind up shadowboxing and beating yourself up, because it's kind of a spiraling thing downward. If once you kind of go, well, I stubbed my toe on that, I have a little bit of a limp. Well, now my whole hip hurts. Well, my back hurts. I'm not even going to do anything more about this. And you lose or lack motivation as a result. Now, number 8 is something that I must say, this is probably the one I have the hardest time with, that and the tools. And that is always having a backup plan. When you run your own business, and if you are involved in the business world, you wind up going, well, having a backup plan is like a sign of weakness. How unfortunate I have learned that without a backup plan, really, you have big problems. And the reason why is the law of Murphy rolls around, and if it can go wrong, it will go wrong at the very, very worst time. We've got the opportunity to service a lot of people, and when we do, we'll get some pretty interesting lifeline calls or texts or messages and going, hey, I'm here and this isn't working. Or, hey, I'm here and I can't find X, Y, or Z. And we love to do that. And we love to help whenever we can. We hope most of the time it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. But, we've also had a call, I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I was scanning, and then this happened, or I don't have that, and it was on a weekend. That's why we've gone to a 24-hour online answering service. People will at least listen to your question and try to get you some help if we can do it, and it's not after midnight. But not having a plan and not realizing that Murphy's Law is going to happen to you is always a challenge. So having Plan B is something you must do, and you must talk. If you're doing it for your clients, you must have a backup plan. I know these are our expectations. I know these are our time frames that we're looking for, but if we don't make that, for some reason something comes up, what is the consequences of that? How do we feel about that? What is there another way we can work around it? And if you have those kinds of thoughts and processes and you jot them down, you're going to wind up doing much better. The other thing is, I like to think of Plan B as also a second check. So we do a lot of events at Easy Photo Scan, and when we do that, we do not travel light. If anybody's ever been to one of our events, we're usually the first ones there, plugging into every outlet we can get our hands on, and we're usually the last ones there, packing up all of this equipment. It's not for the faint of heart to do this. And we have a joke around the office, is the literature stand in? Now, I'll tell you the story behind the literature stand, and that goes to an individual that told me everything was packed. we got there, and indeed everything was packed but the literature stand. And so I had all this literature, literally all this literature, and no place to put it. Because we have all our tables set out with scanners and no place to put the literature. Well, a quick run for Plan B, right? A quick run over to the Staples office or the Office Depot, and we picked up some of these little plastic pieces that we could do something, and we kind of made do with what we could. But that was more a MacGyver move than doing what we now do, and that's go through a second time through the checklist. We have a statement around here: measure twice, cut once. Makes a lot of sense if you stop to think about it. Do I have all the tools that I need? Check, 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 check. And then we ask somebody else to check for us. Now, if you work by yourself, then just give a little time, then come back, circle back, and ask again. Don't take for granted that you're such a wonderful person and you never make a mistake that you could no way have left something out. Go back through as if you're approaching it brand new again, and then check again. But the secret is having the list and having an understanding. Do I have power cords? Do I have extension cords? Do I have tape to tape down the extension cord if I'm in there? So, do I have a way to protect it or something to cover over so people don't trip and fall? Do I have cleaning supplies? Do I have, whatever it is, do I have my toolbox with me with all of my photo organizing tools? Whatever it is, you want to make sure that you have that and that you check it and then you recheck it. So that Plan B is kind of a fun thing to have available, but sometimes Plan B also means just doing that second check, because so often you say, oh, wow, I thought I had that, but yes, I missed it. And that prevents those types of things. Number 9. Number 9 is the folly of trusting your technology. There's a statement that we use. It's an Aesop statement. William Shakespeare picked it up and put it into one of his plays as well, called All That Glitters Is Not Gold. And just because I have this technological advanced tool to do whatever I'm going to do in my photo organizing and put my library together, it can, and it probably will at some point, fail. I love to read posts about from the APO members and the professional folks that are doing this as a business, and it's surprising how many times, my drive just failed comes up. Or I have a client whose drive failed, or these things that we've placed all of our technology in this, all of our faith in this and in this technology, and then boom, it fails, and then we're kind of stuck. And it can be very expensive to fix the problem as opposed to preventing the problem by having backups or having some other systems in place. The other thing I will remind you is that Thomas Edison didn't just walk into the lab one day and create the light bulb. In fact, contrary to belief that he took 10,000 tries, he actually has 2,274 documented experiments on the light bulb that he tried, okay? So you need to test and retry your process. This is one of those continuous things as you go through for your technology. And we, around our office, try to teach it or work with it more like a pilot would going through a checklist. Now, most of us have been on a plane and flown, and you've probably walked by the pilot's cockpit as it has been open, and they're walking through the whole process. They've got the checklist, the co-pilot sitting there, checklist going through, the pilot's flipping some knobs. Sometimes you'll actually see the pilot get out and go down on the tarmac and walk around the plane and do the physical check. They're checking all their equipment. That means they're testing. That means that they're trying. Just like Edison, you don't want to go, oh, yeah, sure, we can do this job. I'll go make you a light bulb right now, and we'll all be able to see at night. No, you take on this photo organizing job. You need to test. You need to experiment. You need to do your research. You need to document your tries and go through it until you feel comfortable that you can actually execute. We're doing that right now with a job with a very large client that's got a ton of pictures in the millions, and we are having fun going through this testing process as we begin to work with them through that and help them as they prepare to digitize their images. And it's a lot of fun, but it's also something that you have to plan for. And so finally, number 10. Number 10 has to do with knowing when good is good enough. Now, I am not exactly sure if you are attracted to doing photo organizing and scanning and digitization because you're a perfectionist, or it makes you a perfectionist. I'm not exactly sure, but we see a lot of perfectionists in this business. Oh, we've got all of these possibilities. And all of a sudden, you can become overwhelmed. You can become just like Alice in Wonderland as she comes up to the tree. Cheshire's cat sitting there, road split in front of her. Says, where do you want to, it says, which road do I take? Cheshire Cat. And Cheshire Cat goes, well, where do you want to go? And says, I don't know. Then Cheshire Cat replies smugly, and it doesn't matter which road you take. So the challenge is that while we all strive for that perfection and that very high level of service and high quality, settle for something, because you can get overwhelmed by this. And then all of a sudden, when you get overwhelmed, it starts to snowball on top of you, and your possibilities become an issue where all of a sudden they become a detriment. They become like an anchor. Oh, well, then we could do this, and then we could do this. No, just do something. That's a statement we have around our office, is just do something. We use, and we will have this as a handout as well for you, some guidelines. These guidelines help us to put into perspective. They're not mandatory, but they at least guidelines. So when a client walks in and says, I want everything scanned at 2400 DPI and TIFF, we're like, okay, but when is good enough? And then we start asking some of the questions, what are your expectations, and all the way through. But then we have something to fall back on when we might have to say no. Well, we're kind of coming to the end of our presentation. I hope that you've enjoyed these, but I'm going to give you one bonus shocking truth. This shocking truth is something that we oftentimes are guilty of ourselves, and that's not keeping the eye on the ball. And I mean that from this standpoint. No matter whether you're doing it yourself and doing your organization of your photos, or you're doing it with your family, or you're serving your clients, this is for their fun. This is supposed to be an enjoyable experience. And so often, sometimes we get locked in the nitty-gritty of all these technological things and all these truths that just are horrific if you really stop to think about them, can be overwhelming. But the whole idea is to have fun. So we hope that you'll take these shocking truths and figure out a way to kind of at least wrap your arms around them. Will you master them all? Maybe not. But even if you've just mastered one or two as a result of this presentation, we've come a long way. But let's all remember this. Let's all remember about having fun and making sure that we keep the eye on the ball, and that is to help connect our stories in the printed pictures that we digitize or the digital images that we take to those, so that we can keep them, share them, protect them, and we can connect with them as well. So I want to say thank you so much, and I think there might be a question or two. David, are you on the line? Have you read any questions? I see a couple here.
There's just a few here. A very early question at the very beginning. Was it 80 billion or 80 million pictures taken in the year 2000?
80 million.
80 million, all right. That will take care of that one. Here's another one. It says, when estimating a job, how much of a contingency should you put into a particular plan in time and money? Let's say 10%, 15%.
Yeah. So not talking about specific costs and things, because those will vary. When you have somebody that is planning a budget and you're putting together a job, you have different overhead. I have 40 mouths to feed here. We've got a lot of things that overhead that you might not have. So when you think about budgeting, you want to think about overhead, right, as part of it. But then when you do your time and motion studies, when you understand the job completely, I'll usually put a fudge factor in there. And that fudge factor will typically be at least 10%. And the reason I use 10% is because my experience has taught me that there's always something, some skeleton that somebody brings out of the closet, and I'm prepared for that. The nice thing about it is we always love to over deliver. And so it would be great if you budget 10% high and you come in low and you say, hey, listen, you know what? I love I love to have opportunity to do more business with you. I'll give you 10% discount on your next job. And so we do that quite often here. So that's one way to look at it. But again, consider your budget and what you've got to have per hour. Like, I know what I have to have per hour to make it so that we can keep the doors open. And that's the same kind of thing that you guys need to do if you're doing it for others. All right. Any other questions, David?
I'm not seeing anything through so far. It seems that that is all of it.
Okay. Well, I am so glad to have had you join us today. We look forward to sending you out an email with the handouts of the planning tools and as well as the guidelines that we spoke about. This presentation has been recorded, and we will bring it up to you within the next 24 hours. And we hope that everybody enjoys a great Mother's Day. And we thank each and every mom for all that they do for their families. Have a great afternoon, and thank you for spending the time. We'll see you next month when we'll be sharing a little bit about how to be a star. We've got a guest speaker coming that has developed a fantastic program called STORE, and it's all available to you free, so you'll be able to also get some great information for that. So have a great afternoon. Thank you.